Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Jess Marshall podcast. I'm your dude, Jess Marshall, and this week I've got the pleasure of talking with Filip Keuppens with Pickle Juice Sport. Filip's a fellow rugby guy with the Dallas Reds, but also Senior VP of Marketing for Pickle Juice, which is a pretty amazing product. If you work out and you ever get muscle cramps, you'll want to tune into this. I hope you enjoy the show. What was the flavor, or can you not talk about it? It's confidential.
Yeah, it's not out yet.
It's
kind of one.
But you developed it.
Yeah,
and it's is it in the sports performance realm?
No.
Okay.
No, it's not. It's more of a casual sort of thing, but it's not dissimilar. It's a different product, but it's not dissimilar to the deal we had with like Pickle Rick to make the pickle seltzer. I don't know if you saw that.
Okay.
It was like, can look cool. It was like a Pickle Rick looking can.
Gotcha.
But what we did, so those companies come to us when they want to create a pickle flavored beverage.
Okay.
And they're like, how do we do this? So we go.
Because you have the tincture, you have you know how to flavor it, so it tastes it's right out of a Vlasic jar or whatever.
Well, that's not what we go for.
Right.
It's because our formulation is more consistent. It's not like just some leftover stuff in the jar, so we can alter it to specific specifications.
Okay.
So they'll literally send us their base product and say, we want to create a pickle flavored version of this, and I'll take it in the lab and start adding stuff. And the formulation I created for the seltzer, if you drank it, it'd be pretty nasty.
Really?
It was not good to drink by itself. And I also learned when you're doing formulations, you also become like a human guinea pig.
Yeah.
So I remember
you're the one trying everything before. Yeah.
Yeah, and people know that when I'm in the lab, they know better. When I'm like, hey, come in here for a second, they're like,
no,
I got a thing. I'm busy.
I got a thing.
They'll come by an hour later and be like, what'd you need? No, never mind. I'm good.
So do you remember the Dallas Cowboys, Philadelphia Eagles
It's the reason we exist.
Okay. So I was wondering, and I was talking to some people about having you on because as soon as that happened, I was playing rugby then. Gosh, when was that? What year was that?
September 2000.
So I was up at North Texas, and we all started drinking pickle juice.
Pickle Brine.
Because we thought it was somehow magically hydrating us. We didn't understand the science. Explain the science, because that's,
So it's actually like the exact origin story that everybody knows, right? They're like, especially around here, the infamous pickle game, right?
Yeah.
And it was the hottest game in the history of the NFL. Field temperatures at the old stadium in Irving were like 112 degrees or something insane. Cowboys were favored to win over the Eagles, end up getting smoked. It was like 40 to teens, right? The reason it became such a big deal was after the game, the athletic trainers from the Eagles were being asked why their players weren't cramping up, but the Cowboys players were. And they said they were drinking pickle brine, like the stuff right out of the jar. And exactly to your point, the assumption for years was that the high sodium content in pickle brine was the thing that prevented cramps, because we make an association between electrolytes and cramping, and we know that 62% of the electrolytes in your body are sodium. It was so then the original founder of Pickle Juice, the company, started essentially packaging pickle brine. It was very novel, didn't have a whole lot of distribution. But then fast forward to 2010, and Dr. Kevin Miller out of BYU started testing different folk remedies for sports. Excuse me. And one of those was pickle brine. And the way he tested it, because he also assumed it was an electrolyte thing, so he used a transdermal electric stimulation. So instead of a TENS unit, it's a PENS unit, which is underneath the skin, to artificially induce cramping. So imagine signing up for that study, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to put this needle in your big toe and create a muscle cramp.
Man, I'll pass.
Yeah, I'm good on that, right?
I'll go in on your taste test ones, but not on that one.
So he realized after the test that, so he did base electrolyte content analysis of the subjects and then administered pickle brine, and he was administering about 10 milliliters per 10 kgs of body weight. So average 200-pound guy, like 2 ounces ish, right?
So like a shot.
Yeah. And realized that there was no material difference in their electrolyte levels, but they were experiencing relief. So at that point, we realized that he started realizing it was something else, and further research and studies made him realize that muscle cramps are a neurological phenomenon, not a physiological phenomenon. So it's actually your brain responding to a physiological trigger. So that's why when you ask somebody about muscle cramps, you ask 10 people, you get 12 answers, right? Eat a banana, hydrate, stretch, potassium, sodium, magnesium,
Gatorade,
whatever.
Pedialyte, yeah.
Well, they're all wrong and they're all right at the same time, because those are all associated with triggers, but not the actual cause. So what we did was we figured out a way to disrupt the nerve signal that transmits the cramping message from your brain to the muscle. We block it. We do that by using a proprietary grain of acetic acid, fancy word for vinegar, to overload that neural pathway with information. So the analogy I use is like, imagine a bunch of cars merging to get into a tunnel, right? Only that tunnel can only process so much information. So the more information you throw at it, the more congested it gets. So that signal doesn't get through, resets, opens that channel back up, and then we flood the trouble spot with sodium, which draws all the remaining electrolytes in your system to it. So it's kind of a 1-2 punch. That's why this works better than anything else in the world. And we got lucky that there is a natural progression from the sort of folk remedy packaging to the scientific place where we are now. And at the time, we felt that the name Pickle Juice was a lot more accessible to people. It was less intimidating because we wanted to make sure that we were introducing a healthy USD organic product that you see on grocery store shelves and not in your doctor's office. And so we're taking this functional beverage concept to a higher level. And, so we're always pushing the envelope to get better and better and better. I talked before the interview about striking while the iron's hot, right?
Yeah.
So, and having this healthy level of paranoia to keep your business moving forward, right? If you're not afraid that somebody's going to try to destroy your business overnight, being a little melodramatic, you're not moving forward.
No, you're right on the money, man. You got to have a sense of urgency.
Right.
Yeah.
So to that end, we're releasing like 3 new products this year that are completely unrelated to Pickle Juice, completely rebranding our company again.
Really?
Opening a whole new manufacturing facility. We built our manufacturing plant in Mesquite in 2015, and I joke that we're either really good at growth or really bad at forecasting because we just had to buy another plant that's 10 times the size. So we're moving into a 100,000 square foot facility kind of across the street to triple our manufacturing capabilities. And now we're looking at diversifying our revenue streams to make sure that the company is bigger than our flagship product. So we're introducing a couple of new products. One's a really, really cool CBD product that is stronger and less expensive than anything else on the market.
Helps with sleep and pain and stuff like that?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of people making a bunch of claims about CBD,
yes,
right?
There
so
are.
The only thing we claim is the stuff that has been researched, proven, and verifiable. So we only talk about chronic pain and inflammation. That's it. That's our space. We also triple lab test it. So if you're an athlete subject to World Anti-Doping Agency controls, you're completely clean. We test it 3 times through 3 different labs. None of the labs know who's talking to who. So, and we actually have a QR code on our label that when you scan it, shows you all of the lab results for that batch. So it's super transparent. But we're trying to cut through all the snake oil out there because people are just trying to make a quick buck, which is dangerous, right, for the industry as a whole.
Sure.
because people are like, oh, this stuff doesn't work. Well, if you've got 10 milligrams in a liter bottle with a bioavailability of 25%, you're consuming 2.5 milligrams of CBD over a liter. You're not going to get any. That doesn't do anything, So we're pretty excited about that. We're starting to do some co-packing. We're starting to do some co-branding stuff. So it's going to be an exciting year for us.
Your background, what you studied in college, hospitality, right?
Yeah, I've got a couple degrees, hospitality and economics, and then got an MBA after that.
Right on. The sales side of what you do, though, you've got a background in sales.
Right.
Your career has progressed up to what you're doing now, VP of Marketing. Is that your title now?
Yeah, but I guess it's changed a little bit. So there were two of us. There are three partners. There's a strategic partner who also runs another company, and then there were two tactical level partners, myself and another guy who's recently retired. So now I'm kind of running the day-to-day, front of the house and the back of the house, but we're really empowering our senior level management to kind of run their own divisions now, and it's creating a great culture of positive ownership, right?
Sure.
The director of sales owns the sales division. Our operations manager owns the operations division, and we're finding that people are really, really buying in and excited about it. They can affect the future and the strategy of the company. We've got some incredible people, like our logistics coordinator runs our whole logistics operation.
That's awesome.
It's really cool because we're trying to not only cultivate a company, but we're trying to cultivate people's careers, right? And without people, a product is nothing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The collaboration of the collective is what gets the team over the try line.
Exactly. Right.
There's no hey, one man, one woman's more important than the group. It's all about us working together to achieve the goal. When you're working to try to bring a product from obscurity and we don't even know why it works to market as like a mainstream performance enhancing product, lots of barriers to entry there.
Right.
Talk about the difficulty of getting the thing on shelves. If you didn't even know why it worked, so the Eagles just said, well, we just started drinking it. I mean, how'd they know? They were just trial and error. They go, this is working.
It was the supposition that it was a sodium, right? So they were using it accidentally. And the reality is, until we knew why it worked, we didn't have any success.
Was anyone doing it before Philly was doing it, at least on a grand scale?
Not on a broad
pro
scale, no. I think that's
endurance athletes maybe doing it, or
nothing documentable. Like, we usually point to that Eagles-Cowboys game as like the first really broad example. Like, I've met a couple like super old school like rugby refs and ultra runners, like, oh, I used to take a shot at vinegar or something, but you never really associate that. But the reality is, until we really knew why it worked and knew how to go to market, we weren't having success. So the company.
So that BYU study is what put you on the map, just in terms of being able to tell people why it worked.
Well, 5 years later in applying it. So from 2001 to 2015, we were very regionalized and dare I use the term novel, right? So we had about 400 points of distribution. We're selling $250,000 in revenue a year. Really.
So fledgling a bit.
Yeah, it really didn't have a direction. And in 2015, we said, look, there's something here. Really created a go-to-market strategy, a vision, a message, created distribution, created an infrastructure, rebranded, reformulated, started over, kept the name and the look, and that's it. Everything else was brand new. And since then, we've grown to 10,000 points of distribution domestically from about 300 5 years ago, and now have offices in Melbourne, Johannesburg. We're opening up Europe. We're relaunching in Canada. We're ramping up in Mexico. So, we've really grown very, very rapidly by taking a step back, developing a strategy, and we created a very unique hybrid approach between traditional CPG, experiential, and mission-based to create this whole sort of organic messaging approach where it's based entirely on the functionality of the product. We don't do any paid media. Everything's organic. It's through partnerships with brand ambassadors. It's through partnerships with nonprofit events. So we partner with about 300 nonprofit events when it's not COVID, obviously. We've got about 100 top tier brand ambassadors. And, well, that's not true. We do sponsor a pro women's cycling team. And they're incredibly successful. They had over the past 3 years, they've had a 50% win rate with about a 76% podium rate, which is insane.
Oh.
But the part of our mission, like the mission-based component, is that we are actively trying to help bridge the gender pay gap in sports. So, it's just something we believe in. We're also trying to advance the opportunity for athletes to do their thing, right, without just paying them to do so. I mean, I was a pretty competitive skier before I was a rugby player, and when you're in these like emerging sports and you can get a sponsorship, I mean, you're, sleeping in a house with like 10 other folks that are just trying to pursue a dream. So if a sponsor comes in, you'll endorse anything, right? You don't really care. So it's not really that organic. So we wanted to avoid all that and create an organic experience. So we call it now product discovery. It's all about getting the product in the hands of the people when they need it most. Because I can tell you till you're blue in the face how great it is. But if you're having a muscle cramp and I can hand it to you, and then that cramp goes away, you're hooked.
Yeah.
And now you're going to tell 100 people about it. You've got a whole lot more credibility than I do because you don't have this Pickle Juice logo on your chest.
I used it. It worked. Right when you guys were emerging and coming to market, wasn't Jason Witten a celebrity endorser for a minute?
Yeah, like way back in the day.
Okay.
That was obviously before my time. And again, we didn't really have a strategy.
Yeah.
Right? It was like, it happened to be like, oh, here's this new rookie tight end. And Witten's like, exactly like I said, he's like, I'm just a rookie tight end. Nobody knew he was going to be like, Ring of Honor, first ballot Hall of Fame, like arguably Mount Rushmore of tight ends type guy. And it was, I don't think that if I told you how much that deal cost the company, you'd be pretty surprised. But again, that was not really what we're about anymore. Like that was kind of part of that first sort of 10, 15 years of, I don't know, just kind of throwing stuff at a wall and not really having a strategy.
Yeah. What drew you to throwing in with a startup? I mean, it's not easy work. That's tough sledding, man. And I'm sure that at the beginning, the money wasn't great. I'm sure it was a labor of love for a while. You caught the vision, maybe even brought some of your own vision to the table. Walk us through how that went down.
It was, you and I talked a few days ago, and I said you have to have an entrepreneurial spirit, and oftentimes entrepreneurs don't do well in corporate environments. And I didn't, and I was always that person that went to a really big company, skyrocketed up to middle management, and then immediately became a threat, right? And then because I never had this understanding of playing the game. It was always about just delivering results. And I always felt that because, frankly, I wasn't good at playing the game. I just...
We're here to win.
Right. We're here to win. And
I'm here to win and win every day.
Yeah, and I don't want to, placate this person because they're friends with that person or buddy up with that guy because he's friends with the
bullshit captain. Politics and the...
Yeah, and I was never good at that, and I never understood that piece of it. And I was in the home entertainment industry selling DVDs and Blu-rays. Remember those? That was a huge industry for a while.
Big time.
We were selling $1 billion a year to Walmart. It was insane how big that industry was. But then the bottom fell out, and I was kind of like trying to figure out what I wanted to do when I grew up, if you will. So I was doing a lot of consulting and stuff, and a guy I ride motorcycles with came up to me. He was like, hey, my dad's got this kind of side hustle Pickle Juice thing that he's involved with. Can you come take a look? And I'm like, well, I'm a consultant. That's what I do, right? And they said, hey, we want somebody to kind of take on our sales and marketing and get us to the next level. And I said, guys, I didn't mean this offensively, but I said, you don't have the revenue to be able to employ somebody that has 15 years of Fortune 50 director level experience. And we worked out a deal. And I took a very 200% pay cut to go there, where I was barely able to cover my bills. But I believed in it, and I wanted to see if these kind of ideas and visions and go to market that I had.
Why did you believe in it so passionately?
Because it was unique, it was functional, it was marketable, and it wasn't just another thing. It was new and it was real.
It's like it's not gonna fizzle out.
Right.
It's going to remain relevant as long as people are exerting themselves.
Right. So it was. Yeah, so I knew what it could be, right? Like it was just, again, we'll stick with the sports analogy. Like, rugby, you see this amazing athlete show up to practice one day who's never touched a rugby ball, and everybody's like, oh, this guy can't catch, he can't do anything. And then the coach is like, this guy's going to be a freaking superstar. You just got to mold it.
Right.
It was the same thing as that, right?
Sure.
I just kind of had to mold it. And I mean, we threw the playbook out. Reformulated, rebranded, changed our go-to-market strategy, changed everything other than, like I said, the logo and the label. And it's been successful. I mean, it was hard. I remember when I started, I found this out a couple of years later that my buddies mocked it so much that there was a fantasy football league called Filip Keuppens the Pickle Pusher. Like everybody thought it was a joke, right? They're like, what's this clown doing? And they thought I was off my rocker or thought I was insane. And, it just takes the belief and hard work and not being afraid to fail, because you will, right?
Yeah.
Abraham Lincoln failed 12 times in life before he became president. Winston Churchill was written off as sort of a drunk loser before he became prime minister. And it's the old iceberg analogy. Everybody sees the piece above the water, but they don't see everything below it.
No doubt.
So yeah, it's kind of not an atypical sort of build ground up story, really.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of similarities. I had a guest on about a month and a half ago, Kurt Lennington. He runs a roofing company as well. Super successful guy. Ran 180 LA Fitnesses all over the U.S. Never got a New Year's Day off,
right?
Even when he was at high management, making a ton of money, and stepped away from that to start his new venture just because he was buying his time back. But one thing that's very similar, your story and his, is him talking about what he learned through the corporate America stuff that he didn't want to replicate, that he wanted to go away from. Do you have experiences, or did you make serious mental notes when you were going through something where you hit a glass ceiling or maybe a brick wall in middle management where you're like, hey man, if I ever have my own deal going, I'm going to make sure all of my people know they can rise and keep rising if they deliver results?
Absolutely. One of my first managers outside of college, I was like, he essentially mentored me because I wanted to be the exact opposite of what he was. This dude was kind of
one of those deals.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I've had a lot of great bosses. I've had some not so great bosses, but the one thing I never really had throughout my career was like an actual mentor, somebody who I felt was genuinely interested in developing my career. And just like in sports, I feel that if we can accelerate someone's personal career development, that person is going to be so much more of an asset to not only you, but themselves and just the business world as a whole, right? Sometimes, you have to balance that because a 23-year-old kid right out of college might, they don't know what they don't know, right? And they kind of come in and they don't realize, like, remember when we were in our 20s, what we thought was a big deal now is people that run their own businesses. I run into 2 or 3 things a day that, if managed improperly, could be catastrophic to the business, right? So you just kind of take those things in stride, and it's teaching people and really letting them get into the system. And if they kind of buy in and develop, you're like, look, I'm going to take you all the way to the mountaintop with me, because it creates mutual loyalty. And I firmly believe in a servant leadership approach, if that loyalty is reciprocal from your subordinates, right? So I'll do anything for anybody as long as it's a two-way street. And I think that's really important in a company.
Do you initiate that? You see potential in someone who comes on board, you're taking those first steps to kind of get them rolling, and here, tag along with me. Come with me to this meeting, that type of thing?
If I don't see that in them, they won't work for us.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of my interviewing process. So usually when somebody joins us, there's probably 3 layers of interviews, and I usually get involved. I'm involved in the pre-vetting phase more than people realize, and then they'll go through, the last interview they have is a person vacating that position unless they leave the organization, but that usually doesn't happen. We're pretty decent at retaining people after the entry level, and we usually start people sort of at the ground level, and then they work their way in. We don't like going externally for middle or senior management if we can avoid it. Sometimes you have to, just because the skill sets are necessary. But one of the things I noticed that the people in my organization that have success and seem to be really good cultural fits, and I can't stress enough how important culture is, right? You have to create a positive culture that everybody can buy into. And the people I find that have success in my organization are people that have been really competitive and in a space that requires a grind, but have taken some lumps along the way. So we have a rising star in our organization who was a very competitive classic musician and was a French horn player and got to be really, really good. And then in college had the foresight and the maturity to realize that I'm not going to get to the level in this space that I'm going to be able to get to. So this person was able to reinvent themselves at like 20, 21 years old. And that takes a lot of discipline, strength, humility, and willpower.
And vision.
Yeah, we've got...
You don't see vision in young people very often.
No, but I'm really fortunate in that we have a lot of people in our employ that kind of meet that mold. They've met some kind of a hurdle, like a unexpected wedge in their road. They're on some pathway. We're able to reinvent and steer and adjust, and those people do really, really well because, when you're in a rapidly growing environment, you're asking people to do a lot. You're asking them to commit, buy in, and more. They can go to a Fortune 500 company and have a predetermined career path. It's a lot less stress, a lot less work, a lot more security, but there's the chance to really succeed doesn't exist.
No.
Right? You can just be a Dilbert for the rest of your life.
Yeah, you got guarantees. One of those guarantees is you're never making more than this amount.
Yeah, and we don't really look for people that look for comfort and are happy with mediocrity.
You're looking for you're looking for people with grit.
Yeah.
And people who are familiar with being comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Which is an axiom that all the greats abide by. There's a lot of guys with huge social media followings who their entire following is built on that. Jocko Willink, for example. It's all about Let's get uncomfortable. David Goggins, let's get uncomfortable as often as possible,
right?
Because that's where you grow. If you're just flowing with what you know, and it never hurts, you're never getting better.
Yeah.
Just like if you always play teams that you kill by 50 points, you never improve as a team.
Still better about that, huh?
Hey, when I was playing, it was the other way around.
I know. I was on the receiving end of that.
Hey, is it hard to wear Harlequin green every day, though? I mean, is that a hard one?
There's
we're a little more Kelly. We're a little more this green right here.
I'll actually probably be wearing a Quinn's anniversary jersey that John Dale gave me.
There you go.
Maybe I'll wear that tomorrow.
You should wear that tomorrow. Yeah, man. Maybe Becca and Greg will let John bring a keg of his Dale Ale in there, too. That's going to be a good deal. We have a wake tomorrow for a dear rugby buddy of ours who passed away, man. Life is very short. Passed away 50 years old and very unexpected, and it's horrible. Let's bring the room way down on that.
Yeah.
Back
thanks.
to your mentor by de facto, if you will. This guy who, hey, everything this guy does, I'm doing the opposite of.
Right.
What are some real acute examples of things that he would do that you were like, fuck no, man, I am not doing that. That is insanity. Why would you even do that?
I can name two. One, this guy was a perception is reality guy, right? So he would create an aura rather than just delivering the reality, and that bothered the hell out of me. There were two ridiculous things that happened. One, at the time the company was staying at like Holiday Inns. That was one of the preferred hotels we'd stay at. I'm probably dating myself a little bit here, but and there's a Holiday Inn like a mile from my house, right? But there's also one on the other side of the city where I lived. This is in Rochester, New York. And this guy would book the other one and then schedule a 6:30 breakfast meeting at his hotel. And then the other thing he used to do, which I thought was a clear indication that he had a complete disconnect from how to develop people, was he'd always make the most junior person at the table pick up the tab and then be like, oh, you can expense it. Well, that's the opposite of what you should do, right? Like,
right.
You should appreciate a mentor. That was one thing. The other thing this guy would do, and we kind of figured it out, was he's the guy that would draft an email, say in the afternoon, sit on it, put it in his outbox, and then click send first thing in the morning to create the perception that he's working earlier than he was. It was just one of those guys. You know? It's like, dude, people see through it, and I think there's a trust factor, right? Once you deliberately start manipulating reality in order to advance the perception of self-worth, you know, we have this assumption that, and that's just arrogance, right? Because you're assuming, in order to do that, you're assuming that the people that are being exposed to that behavior are less intelligent and less observant than they are. And the reality is, the minute you start assuming you're better or smarter than the other people in the room, this is the moment you fail, you know?
Yeah, you lose the room if you're a head coach. And if you're running an organization, that's what you are. You're a head coach, right?
Yeah.
You're
or even or the player that thinks it's all about him, right?
Have had a few on my team that are no longer on the team.
Right.
You're like, hey man, this is how we do it. We don't make anybody do needless busy work. To me, burns people out faster than anything.
Yeah.
If they don't see the reason behind something, it pisses them off. And there is a need for systems, processes, discipline, and things of that nature. But we all got to do it. This is one of the things we got to do. We just got to do it. Losing the room, especially if you're running a company, is tough. I mean, that's a tough deal, especially if you've got ownership stakes in what you're running.
Right.
Because losing the trust of the people who are looking to you for they're providing for their families off the backs of what you're telling them to do.
Right.
So if you're putting an email in your outbox and then sending it at 4:45 a.m. or just whenever, you can set those to send early too.
Right.
Automatically. Yeah, man. You're not that being there is a time, I believe, where too familiar is a problem. Like
Right.
we can't be going out and getting wasted together,
Right.
and there be that good mentor protege dynamic. But being real is super important. Maybe
Yeah.
sharing some struggles, or,
Yeah.
hey man, I've been where you are, Do you think the reason why you never really gravitated toward or found a mentor to pull you along is just because you didn't see in someone else something that you really wanted? Because I don't really have a mentor either, and I ask everyone who comes on the show about mentors. And I tell everyone who asks me, if you see someone and you like what they're doing, chase them down.
Right.
Go tell them, man, I'll mow your lawn for an hour of your time.
Yeah.
I'll buy you a coffee for 20 minutes or whatever, because I want what you have. That's the type of thing you gotta be proactive.
And I didn't know that because
See me either.
I was in the military. So
Thank you for your service.
Yeah, thank you. It was an honor.
Awesome.
But it was you're never told, like, if you're trained by the military, and I went in really early, really young. So at a young age, I was told, like, don't speak till you're spoken to. It's very much a top-down thing. So I would never.
You could never approach an authority figure.
I could never go up to somebody and be like, "Hey, man, I think what you're doing is really cool.
Gotcha.
Tell me about it." And then the answer that I would expect to get is, "I'll tell you about it after you're done doing 100 push-ups."
Right.
So I think for me, the loyalty to my chain of command and the organizational mission superseded sort of my own career development. So I think that hurt early, and coupled with a really interesting dynamic of my first career, because I just happened to fall into a situation where the guy who was managing me was really, frankly, a jerk, right? And just not a good guy. And yeah, it happens. You don't know who your leader is going to be. But in hindsight, if I knew what I was getting into, I wouldn't have taken that job. But you learn so much from things, and I think that's important, right? Know what's a learning opportunity. I think humility is really, really important. You're going to take lumps along the way and embrace them, right? And don't try to convince somebody you're something you're not. I mean, I was thinking about this morning as I was getting ready. I said, even if you are the smartest person in the room, and more often than not, you're not, right? Because it was like I think it's attributed to Einstein, but I don't think Einstein said it. Like, if you measure a fish's intelligence by its ability to climb a tree, you're going to think every fish is stupid, right? But if you inversely, if you measure a fish's intelligence by its ability to swim, it's going to look pretty intelligent, right? So everybody has something to offer, and even if you think you know more than everybody else, you're missing the opportunity to learn about something you don't know, right? Like, you never ask the general what's going on in a battle. You ask the private in the trenches. So I think perspective and humility are really, really important in that regard.
Most definitely. Did you enlist in the military right out of high school?
I actually enlisted while I was still in high school.
Okay.
So I'm originally from Belgium, and I figured, well, if I'm going to make the U.S. my adopted country, I should earn it somehow. So I figured the best way to do that was serve in the military. So I joined.
Was that something that you wanted to do from an early age? Well, when did you move here?
I moved here initially when I was 7. I moved back and forth until I was 17. No, I think it was just sort of a principle-based thing. I've been kind of sort of a principle-based person for as long as I remember. I guess
got core values that.
I guess, like, it wasn't something.
It
wasn't something I consciously sought out to do. I just felt that was the right thing to do. My dad, who I still admire and look up to, like I did when I was a kid. And my mom, they raised us right. They raised us to work hard, not take anything for granted, and be decent. Give back.
Sure. the values that you learned in the military, discipline, sticking to a schedule, doing what you're told, stuff like that. What about hanging in there? Did you learn? I mean, were there times when you were like, man, this is not what I thought it would be?
Yeah, so I developed this kind of saying I tell myself when I start feeling sorry for myself, and I'm sure you've been there. Like, why am I doing this, man? Why don't I just go get a job working for somebody else and just collect a paycheck every week? And it's a lot less hours. You know, we all have those moments, and I just tell myself, worst things have happened to better people, so suck it up and keep going.
Yeah.
You know, because at the end of the day, just by virtue of living in this country, we're better off than most of the world. And the minute we forget that is the minute we lose sight of it. You know, I joke with people all the time when they were like complaining about things like, you know, it's kind of like complaining about your AC being out because you have AC.
Yeah.
You know, like one of those things, or I don't know what to eat because you have too many options.
Right.
Right. There's people that would eat whatever option you had.
There are. Gratitude is most certainly the path to happiness.
Right.
Right?
I think
Maybe
so.
even to joy, which is much deeper than just the surface level happiness. And living a full life has a lot to do with looking at what you and being grateful for what you do have, not just looking at what you don't have or what hasn't gone right in your life.
Yeah.
You know? Because everything that happens in your life, if you're giving your best every day, is what gets you to where you end up going. Right? So you mentioned a job that you wouldn't have taken if you would have had, you know, a little intel. If you had a little time travel and you knew what that boss was going to be all about, you would have gone in another direction. Were there any steps in your life, any segments in there that you regret? You're like, man, I shouldn't. Maybe that degree was a waste of time, or maybe I wish I would have taken a different path. Or are you pretty happy with the way things have gone to get you where you are now?
You know, I think the answer to that question usually is answered by is dependent on where somebody is, right? So if you're content with where you are, can you really say you have any regrets, right? Because everything is something that got us to where we are. Even the hardships, even the bad decisions, the good decisions, whatever it is, somehow contributed to molding us, the people we are today, the place we're in today. So I can't say I have any regrets, even though there are some things that, you know, I wish I probably didn't have to endure. You know, sometimes it's like, man, was the juice really worth the squeeze in that situation? If I was able to make that conscious decision knowing what the outcome was, there's probably some things I would do different, but can I really say that I'm disappointed with the pathway? I can't, right? I mean, I'm lucky enough to be in a place where I'm able to help build a company that's become in 5 years a global phenomenon. I mean, in the last month alone, Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown, was drinking my product on ESPN during a Ravens game in its regular retail packaging. The same bottle you could go buy in the store, he was drinking. 2 weeks prior to that, Tyreek Hill, same thing.
Awesome.
Kansas City Chiefs. Yep. Name me one other product in the world that gets it. That doesn't happen, right? So to be part of something like that 5 years ago was literally a joke. I was the laughing stock amongst my peer group.
Your own friends were laughing at you.
Well, they're rugby players.
This is true. This is what we do, folks.
I think it's one of those, like, if you got to worry when they're not making fun of you.
This is because then you are no longer relevant. No, kicks to the balls is what it's all about in the rugby world.
But I mean that's kind of wild, right?
It's very wild.
And I'm really fortunate to be. I mean, 5 years ago, this was a joke. People thought it was a joke. Didn't see a future. There were 3 stores that carried it. It was Academy, HEB, Berkshire Brothers, and United 5. Now we have 10,000 points of distribution. We're in Walmart. We're in everywhere. We have an office in Melbourne. We had a division in Johannesburg, which may not survive COVID, unfortunately, because just things are a mess and the rand totally nosedove. But, you know, it happens. We're opening up Europe. We've got Canada. This is 5 years. We're completely self-funded.
No Shark Tank bullshit.
We've actually turned Shark Tank down a couple times.
I see. I was going to ask about that. Yeah. Very interesting.
And I think initially it was because the model and Mark Cuban actually changed it from what I understand. And I might be wrong on this because it's like secondhand hearsay kind of stuff that I hear, but I understand that back in the day, just by virtue of going on the show, you had to give up a percentage of your company. And I understand Mark Cuban was an awesome dude, a former rugby guy, right?
A Quinn and a Red. He was talking about it on the ticket last week.
I think every single rugby team within a 100-mile radius probably claims Mark Cuban.
Yeah.
But we know he's an IU guy. He'll admit that.
Absolutely.
But
and a Pittsburgh Harlequins guy apparently as well. So yeah.
Well, they're probably claiming. I bet the London Harlequins probably claim
they
it
might.
Too. Like at one point, somebody said Harlequin, so every Harlequin.
claims probably so.
Yeah, Harley Quinn from the Joker movies.
Yeah,
claimed
she as well.
But it's been just a really wild ride. And I don't think any of this would have happened had it not been like, my one job landed me in Dallas. Then I ended up playing rugby and then decided to get into motorcycles. I wouldn't have met, there are a lot of weird kind of natural things that would have occurred that got me to where I am. And then also having the support of my business partners to say, you know what, let's do what Phil's saying. It makes sense. And having somebody have that confidence after coming out of like the Fortune 500 CYA backstabbing kind of world. I mean, my last big job was weird. I actually got let go because I was promoted into my boss's old job and kind of exposed that it was a lot of smoke and mirrors, that he was doing a lot of smoke and mirrors.
Yeah.
And his buddy was his boss, and they're like, we got to get rid of this guy. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I actually predicted the day I got promoted, I'd be fired to the guy who eventually fired me.
Jeez. Now you've got ultimate control over your own success.
It's to some degree, right? I mean,
yes.
Right
because
now,
the fates must align. Yes.
Well, and right now, my boss, other than my partner, is my employees and my customers, right? I mean, I work harder now because I have more accountability, because if I shit the bed, there's a bunch of people without jobs, and we have to take that very, very seriously. Like, there's people who my decisions and the direction I take this organization is, there are a lot of people dependent on that, right? Because we need, if everything we do collectively gets us bigger and broader, which creates, a bigger downline and adds more people, and then these people that we're mentoring can come up and be more successful. I take that responsibility very seriously, because they've invested their trust in me that I'd be a real asshole if I wasn't doing my damnedest to get them to where they need to go, right? I tell them all the time, I said, look, always make sure you have two projects that are resume worthy going on, because otherwise you're just going to get caught up in the day-to-day, the grind, and it's not going to be fulfilling. I said, I want, and every Monday we have an all-hands call, and I tell them, give me an update on your big projects. What is the thing that if you were to write a resume tomorrow that you would put on that resume that you can really be proud of? Because frankly, I think we should train people so they can leave and treat them in a way that they don't want to.
Right.
If you do that, you're going to be fine.
Well, yeah, so a lot of people don't do that, right? They don't operate out of that abundance mindset. They're holding things back because they don't want to show. They don't want to show someone the absolute path to success from square one all the way to launch, because if they can conceal some of that, then that person can never launch on their own. Yeah, if you train someone to leave, but then treat them so well that they don't want to, that says a hell of a lot about your culture.
Well, and the other thing is, if somebody's withholding stuff to prevent somebody from advancing them, it means they suck. Right? Like if I'm not better at my job than somebody else in my organization, that person needs to be doing that job. And I need to be humble and honest enough that, and again, that's where the hierarchy of priority needs to be company. And if, everybody talks about rising tides raising all ships, but if you can create an organization culture that embraces that, it's like, look, I tell people all the time, don't be afraid to fail. If you try something and it goes wrong, and you can explain the logic of why you did that, I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
Right? If it's like, hey, I thought this would lead to this, would lead to that, and this is why I did that thing. Okay. I have no issue with it. And, they're empowered to make those decisions. If they're big game-changing decisions, I want to be involved and other people are involved, but we're very flat, very collaborative. Because that whole withholding crap, we had a guy like that with the organization when I first got there, and he was so detrimental. And we are still, one of our divisions is still reeling from that culture. We lost a lot of good people because he'd run them off. Wow. And fortunately, the person we have running that division now is really good, and we're really lucky that we've got. I've got an all-star team right now, man. I can't be more proud of what we've got going on. Like everybody there is pulling their weight. They're hitting singles, doubles, and triples every single day. It's great. Everybody's getting on base every single day, and that's pretty cool.
No doubt, man. Production. When did you find rugby, or when did rugby find you?
Well, I started playing rugby to stay in shape for skiing.
Okay.
And then I moved to Texas.
How old were you when you started playing?
16 or 17, yeah.
Just saw guys out.
No, man, I'm
smashing each other.
I'm from Europe, and I sucked at the American sports. No, they don't play rugby in Belgium.
Yeah,
that's not really our thing there.
Yeah,
but I was always kind of interested and intrigued by anything fringe, because, and I don't know why. Like I was in high school, I was like into skateboarding and freestyle skiing and like not the stuff that all the cool kids were doing, and then even as I became an adult, I was like, my hobbies were always kind of not what everybody else does. I was always interested in riding motorcycles and rugby and all similar types of things. And I think it's because those people tend to have like genuine, true passion for what it is that they do, right? Like, and you and I've seen it during our rugby careers, where when you and I started playing, you're a rugby player for life. Right? The minute you're a rugby player, after you play a couple of seasons, rather than just something you try, you're in it for life. You're always a rugby player. Now, as the sport becomes more and more mainstream, you don't see that as much, and it's compromising the infrastructure a bit because we don't have that give back mentality that leads to getting administrators, coaches, referees, and all that stuff that we need to continue to grow.
The culture is eroding because the sport's becoming more popular.
Right. I mean, think about it. Like, do you feel any obligation to whatever sport you played in high school? Like, I was a track guy.
No.
I do not feel an obligation to go coach track because I ran track for a few years. I do feel an obligation to give back to rugby.
Yep.
Because it did more than serve as a sport. It helped mold who we were. And I think I've always kind of been interested in those fringe type of things because that passion exists. And I've always been somebody who's like hyper focused on something. But like, if I believe in something, I'm going all in and I'm doing it. And I think that's what led me to, this is why this type of career is really good for me. It's also why I wasn't into like mainstream sports. So skiing led to rugby, led to everything else, which probably led to Pickle Juice.
Yeah, no doubt. If you're anything like me, when I found it, I was familiar with it because my dad had been to South Africa and New Zealand, brought me back an All Blacks jersey, and I was like, what All Blacks, what is that? I don't know. And then I was running stadium stairs up at University of North Texas and looked down these guys with no lights or just out there just laying each other out, just going all out. And I was like, what's that? And I went down there, started talking to them, and we're the rugby team. I was like, well, what do you have to do? And they were like, put on some cleats, man.
Yeah.
And from there, I was hooked. I mean, 100% heroin drip. I was just like, what is this? I can't believe this is legal.
Yeah.
This is the most awesome thing I've ever. And what drew me to rugby a lot, I have a problem with authority. And you do have a coach in rugby. We lay out a game plan, but then really from Thursday through the 80th minute, or unless you go to overtime on Saturday, it's kind of the captain and the team that run the show. And if you're on the field and you feel like the game plan's not working, you've got the flexibility and the autonomy and the independence to go, no, we're going to start doing it. We're going to get it wide if we were planning to play a compact game, or we're going to get compact if we were playing wide and not winning. That's very that can be correlated very, very quickly over into business.
Yeah.
What you're doing, you've already said, requires a lot of adaptability. Things are changing because you're growing so fast. Exact same principles that I think all of us as rugby players loved. That, and obviously the camaraderie is different in rugby than it is in any other sport, and I've played them all. And hockey might be the closest. But in hockey, you play both ways. You play offense and defense.
Right.
But yeah, those are the principles that drew me to rugby. When you first went out there and started playing, what was it that just grabbed you?
I think it was the culture, frankly, and it was the passion of the other participants. And I had some wheels, right? I was a pro freestyle skier, so I had some pretty strong legs, and I ran track, and I was a skateboarder, so it was pretty quick. So I adapted relatively quickly, and I was playing like men's club A side when I was 17. That was kind of cool, and in hindsight, really stupid. Right? Like, I'm a 17-year-old kid. There's, some guy that hasn't had ears since the 60s.
Yeah, right.
And,
no doubt.
And the rules were a lot different in the early 90s than they are now, right?
No doubt.
As we tell these kids nowadays, uphill both ways, barefoot, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I think, it's what I alluded to earlier. It was that kind of fringe thing, and seeing, like you said, like these guys were just down there, no lights, just laying each other out. And it's that.
Nobody's getting paid.
And it's that passion. You're doing it because you love it.
Right.
And you talked about the ability to, improvise, adapt, and overcome, right? And in rugby, you're accountable. You can do what you want, but you damn well better not be selfish in the process, right? You're like, look, you're accountable to your teammates, right? So if there's a penalty and you're gonna pick and go when we're 20 meters out down by 2 and we could have kicked for points, you're being a dick. Right? Don't be that guy.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting because it's this really fascinating hybrid of accountability and independence, right? And then, the level that I'm coaching now, one penalty can be the difference between a win and a loss. A yellow card, somebody going to the sin bin because they did something stupid, can be devastating, right? At the higher level you get, the more those little tiny errors can have huge consequences. So that I love that that sense of accountability, and I love the accountability to your team part, right? So that guy that thinks he's better than everybody else and tries to be the hero usually costs you the game.
Yeah.
Right? And he might have his stat sheet.
Damn near every time.
Yeah, his stat sheet might look great.
Yeah.
He had like 2 tries and 3,922 carries and, 1 tackle probably.
Yeah, probably so. Hanging out on the wing. Yeah.
Right. So I really love that about the game. I love how the sort of looking at it from, like a sociological and psychological perspective, like how teams are motivated. It's whole kind of being a leader, but doing it through subtle cues rather than, we've all that coach that feels like if he's not barking something, he doesn't feel like he's coaching. And it's like, just chill.
Yeah.
Feed them little bits of information. Some guys need to be reeled back. Some guys need to be pumped up. Some guys just need a joke here and there, encourage. Like, it's understanding all that, and I'm really fascinated about it. And I think, one of my passions, whether I know it or not, is probably like building organizations, right? Whether it be on the rugby club, professionally, or whatever. I tend to gravitate, not for self-serving reasons, but I tend to gravitate to these sort of strategic roles because it's just how I think.
Yeah. The playing side, awesome. I've coached, you've coached, you're still actively coaching, and like you said, at a very high level. When you were coaching the youth sides, the Colt sides, what was special about that to you? I know for me, coaching some of the younger guys, some of them need a father figure, and you can kind of step in there a little bit, or they just need to know that it's okay to be aggressive, and it's okay to be passionate, and it's okay to lay it all out there. My least favorite players to coach were the ones who always wanted to look cool while they were playing. And I almost had no time for them. I really had no time for them playing with them either. If you're more concerned about looking cool on the field than getting on that loose ball, then I don't know, man. I don't know if I can vibe with you. What's different about coaching men than when you coached the youth side?
Coaching high level men is probably exactly like coaching a bunch of 12-year-olds. Except the high level men are probably more emotionally sensitive and needy. No, I'm joking. It's
But you're not.
To some degree. No, you're not teaching skills and tactics to high level players, some of whom have played professionally, will play professionally, or could play professionally. What you're really focused on is creating a culture, a flow, and guiding the ship. I use the analogy of a pirate ship. And when you're coaching, the higher level you're coaching, or the larger of an organization you're leading, the less active coaching you're really doing. It's more passive coaching and sort of making sure you're kind of looking over there. Okay, that guy's doing this and this guy's doing that, and you're kind of like, hey, you ever thought about this thing or that thing, or you ever talked to this guy about this thing? So it's more. I hate to use the term manipulative because it has a negative, it has a negative connotation. So I kind of see my like an organizational leader same way as like you're the captain of a ship, but at the end of the day, you're just holding the rudder, right? Everybody else is putting up the masts and manning the guns and whatever else goes on in a ship. You're not really doing anything, and understanding that your role is really just one of general guidance rather than active coaching. At the youth level, it's a lot more tactical, right? You have to teach kids how to catch, pass, tackle, those basic elements, while also trying to introduce them to the basic culture. So at the senior level, we talk about patterns of play, strategy. We might have 3 or 4 defensive patterns available for use during a game, and understanding that everybody knows that. So the assumption of understanding is higher. So you say, okay, like you have to. If I say, okay, we're going to, I see something in a game and say, guys, let's go to, a swinging gate press. I need to know I can just say that to like the winger who's then going to tell the captain, be like, hey, we're going to go to swinging gate press, or the jockey or whatever, just like that. And they know it. So it's the level of complexity increases. It's also fascinating because the perception of elitism exists for newer players who you'll get like a really high level athlete coming off the streets or another sport, and they're like, yeah, every time I touch the ball, I score a try. Why am I not starting on D1? Well, because that other fly half knows you're 4 meters out of position and will exploit that every single time if I put you in that position. And trying to explain that to somebody is a lot more challenging. So you have to work through that and allow people to understand, like, look, it's going to take 3 years before even the best athlete. I mean, I've seen guys come from the NFL that couldn't make it in D1 rugby because they didn't understand the learning curve. So I think that's the biggest difference.
Yeah, there's for it to become second nature, it takes a lot of reps, which is the very important thing of getting new players game time, match time. In Texas rugby, we've had a real dearth of good referees over the last. I mean, we've had match cancellations for lack of good referees. It's been a problem. I think it's improving now to a degree. What do you think that the advent of Major League Rugby is going to do to benefit and also to injure what we've got in terms of rugby at the youth level, the college level, the men's club level in the U.S.?
I think it's great.
Yeah.
It creates an aspirational pathway for American athletes. I think no college football player is aspiring to be a Dallas Harlequin or a Dallas Red, right? It's just something they might do after they're done doing whatever it is. But now, with the advent of a sustainable professional league, right? Because we've seen other attempts at professionalization, even going back to Super League, right? That was sort of semi-professional-ish, but it wasn't sustainable. Then Pro, several years ago, wasn't sustainable. The MLR looks like a pretty sustainable model in that it's flexible. Teams are kind of able to kind of mold their own way, and the league seems to be amoebus enough that, the Dallas Jackals just announced yesterday that they're going to delay their entry into the league another year. But the league is, just adapt, improvise, overcome. They're still moving on. The standard of the play in the MLR has been really great. So I think the aspirational component is really good. So I think at the collegiate and youth level, that adds so much value, right? I think at the men's club level, it's really important that the MLR figure out whether or not they feel the high-level amateur rugby as it stands today can be an asset. I think some markets...
How could it not?
Well, I'm trying to be delicate about how to say this because it's not a centralized model, right? So some regions are doing their own academies. Some are really embracing the infrastructure. Some are kind of saying one thing and doing another thing. Some, like Austin, have done all three in 3 years. And I think it's curious. The ones that I've seen succeed the most are the ones that have a really good, functional, active relationship with the local rugby scene, where it's not just a PR thing.
No, Seawolves are all inclusive up there, man. That's where I'm from.
Yeah.
And it's a thing, man. And everybody's in on it. And you can tell.
And you look at you look at some established amateur Seattle guys like Tony Riddell and Brucky, and they were all in on Seawolves, which is huge, right? Where you see a lot of other places where the existing community rugby infrastructure is really resistant because they see the MLR as a threat. And I've seen that in another city where the MLR team comes to town and the amateur leadership was like, "What are you going to do for us?" Like, they don't owe you shit, man. Like, you need to realize this. They don't owe you a thing. What you need to do in the amateur community is add value to them. And the minute you add value to them, then because they're a business, right? We talk about this passion versus business kind of thing. And I think a lot of the people in the amateur rugby space don't realize the MLR clubs are first and foremost businesses that need to be financially independently viable. And if the amateur clubs are pooling more than pushing, like where they're taking more than giving, they become an unnecessary strain. And then that's when you see things like academies emerge, and they start bringing things in-house that they would otherwise be willing to outsource. So my personal goal is to make sure that the local MLR community sees value in the amateur community, and I think we're getting better at that. We're getting better at communicating that message. I don't think it was there initially. I think they felt that the amateur community wasn't that much of an asset. I don't think we communicated the depth and capabilities of our resources, because I think the assumption was that, if the players and coaches were capable of more things, they'd be doing more things, not realizing that some of us are out here being involved at the level that we're involved because we want to be at this level, because we have other stuff going on. And I think that's something we as the amateur community need to do a better job of illustrating to the professional community, I think.
How long do you think it's going to take the U.S. to compete at the international level? I'm talking semifinals, World Cup.
Other than being number one in the world in sevens and not even acknowledging it?
Well,
I'm saying that deliberately because
the lack of coverage on that is also baffling. But there's this weird infighting where we can't all just be like, hey, this is all rugby, and the high tide does raise all the ships. It's got to be, no, I'm going to fight you, and I'm going to lawsuit you, and I'm going to come after you, and I'm going to disparage you, and I'm going to undercut you, and we're going to get rid of Vegas sevens, which was wildly successful for reasons that no one understands. And no, it's befuddling. It's like we have this thing that we all like, but everyone holds on to it like it's Lord of the Rings.
I think it's two things. One, there's one fire hydrant and about 500 puppies. Two, I think there's a perception that there's more money in rugby than there is. I think, and through my company, I've been involved. We have almost every team in the world uses our product other than the U.S. Eagles. The USA is the only team that wouldn't give me a meeting in Vegas Sevens. I met with every other team for Pickle Juice. Richie Muanga was drinking Pickle Juice in the World Cup quarterfinals on the field against Ireland. USA Rugby won't take my calls. Though on the amateur side, they've had me do presentations on how to raise money for your clubs. So there's a massive disconnect. I remember when so my company brought the Sevens World Cup and Six Nations to NBC, because we had a partnership with NBC, and you remember the Pickle Juice logo all over those games. It was really cool.
No doubt.
And that was the same year that San Francisco hosted the Sevens World Cup. And I'll say this because the people that did it are no longer involved with RIM, and I think the leadership of USA Rugby back then was more in it for themselves than the game. And rather than acknowledging my company's contribution to the sport, they called me and said, hey, would you be interested in buying a suite for $70,000? That was how they thanked me for my contribution to growing the game in the USA, by asking me for more money, and wouldn't take a meeting with me.
Yeah,
it was baffling how insulting that was.
Is USARFU as we know it right now broken at the highest levels?
It's bankrupt. Right?
I mean, so what do we do?
I think we're starting to see sort of people crawling out of a car wreck, if you will.
Yeah. The burning car wreck.
Yeah. There's some really, really strong GUs, geographic unions. It's kind of like what's old is new again. So the GUs are starting to get more decision-making ability. There have been some some changes at the top that I think are really, really good for the game. There's some people in leadership positions that are more altruistic in nature, whereas historically there have been people that would overtly favor the short-term interests of their own club at the expense of the game. I think the people that are starting to be put into those senior leadership roles are people that don't think that way, that genuinely care about the development of the game. I mean, I would love nothing more than see a guy like Tony Riddell become the CEO of USA Rugby. We need people like that. We need people like Kirk Tate to do what he's doing and sacrificing the amount of time he is at the competitions level. We've got a local guy, David Dodge, who's really involved at the GU level. And these are people that genuinely care about the game, the future of the game, and they're qualified and successful people. I mean, I used to say all the time that the issue with USA Rugby is it's a retirement home for former international players, whether or not they're qualified. And then you see somebody, I'm speaking really openly, probably get myself in trouble, but then you see like one of the smartest minds USA Rugby has in Eric Geib, and they push him out the door. Mm-hmm. It's insane what happened. And then they're surprised that it all falls apart. Right? Because you've got, for a little while, we had some people making the wrong decisions for the wrong reasons. I think we're merging back out of that. I think the participation rate in the game is growing. As long as we can get through and out of COVID properly, I'm personally concerned about player retention because from COVID, whether people are going to just find something else, like the folks that are just kind of kicking the tires on rugby, because having been involved in the game, like the recruitment process is lengthy.
Yep.
Right. You don't just grab a guy and be like, "Come play rugby," and they show up and they're all in. Nope. You got to work on these guys because we're still sort of an underground, obscure sort of thing. The perception that it's just football without pads exists. The perception that it's a lot more dangerous than it really exists. There's a huge delta at the post-collegiate level between, you got recreational rugby where you're recruiting in bars versus elite rugby where you're like trying to get elite athletes to come and try something new. But first you have to convince these people that their competitive athletic life isn't over, right? So it's like, I mean, remember when we retired from playing? That's not easy.
No.
And your body's telling you, bro, you're done.
Yeah.
And you're going, but this is what I know. This is what I do. Yep. And then a few years later, somebody tries to talk you into coming back out. You're like, no, I'm done. Yeah. So, I think it's on the right path. I think we're going to get through these hurdles. But again, don't ask two entrepreneurs if something's going to succeed. Yeah. Because we're going to be like,
eternal
easy.
Optimists. Yeah. What's that take? A little elbow grease and a bunch of grit and some sweat. If the MLR is wildly successful and starts drawing crowds, it's going to attract better athletes. And like you're talking about, that bell curve of getting them to where that muscle memory's there is 3 years. It's going to take 3, maybe 4 more World Cups till we're in the top 10, 6, 4. Don't you think?
Yeah, I think it's going to create a fundamental shift in prioritization. Now, Australia's proven that you can be a world-class contender without rugby being your primary sport.
Oh, no doubt.
Right, because
a lot of people think that rugby's way bigger in Australia than it is.
It's like number 4 or 5.
Yes,
right? You've got AFL, cricket,
league's
huge. Soccer,
basketball's huge.
Yeah, so the Australians have proven that you don't need to be the biggest sport in the country, and every world beater has proven that you don't need a huge playing population to be competitive.
Look at Japan. Yeah.
Look at New Zealand.
Absolutely. Well,
it's 1.1 million people.
Absolutely.
1 million of whom play rugby.
Right. No doubt.
But and their whole infrastructure is built around rugby. So different example, but the model exists to be competitive. We need some more consistency. I think we need to act like we want the job, right? Because we've always sent our best players overseas, assembled them for like a week, and then expect them to compete. When Japan competed in the last World Cup, I think those players were assembled for like 13 weeks or something. That
takes resources.
It takes resources. It takes commitment.
Yeah.
Right. I think
most of those Japanese players were playing in the Japanese Pro League.
Right.
So they were all there.
Right, and the Kiwis had the same deal where you can't play for New Zealand unless you were playing domestically, so you were pseudo available, playing with, against, and similar patterns to that. But I think have the MLR and Japan's a great example, right? Because when Japanese club and professional rugby started getting more competitive, all of a sudden Japan started getting more competitive. Japan's interesting because they have the culture and infrastructure to accelerate to success quicker probably than anybody else, because just the way their society works. Here we have to break down egos, individualism, desire to kind of look out for number one. In Japan, that's already wiped out. That is not part of their mindset. They're all about like general honor and representing that team culture exists. So I imagine any coach, regardless of qualifications, can walk in there. These guys are going to do whatever he says.
Yeah.
Here, that's a struggle. Here you kind of have this. I've got players that kind of resent me because either I don't have an accent or they don't like how I manage or lead, and it's kind of ridiculous, right? But I think the MLR is going to really help, but we need to bridge all the channels. Right now we're operating in silos, right? You got youth, kid plays youth rugby, and then you have to re-engage him at the collegiate level, right? Then kid plays collegiate level, then you have to re-engage him at the men's level. And there's no clear pathway to MLR right now because the MLR clubs are just trying to be viable, and they're like, look, we would like to be involved in the community. We just don't have those resources. Mm-hmm. We would love nothing more than to see like the Australian footy model where, you go to like Melbourne and you see like the Richmond Aussie League's Aussie football club has their own ground, which is like a quarter mile from another huge ground, which is the old like 1956 Olympic pool ground, which is amazing. But they have like youth sides starting from they're like 4 years old all the way up to the senior side. That's pretty cool.
That is.
Soccer in Europe is the same way. I would love the Canadian rugby model. I think is a little more attainable, where you have one umbrella, and so it'd be like, Ottawa rugby, and they all play under one umbrella, and you matriculate up to the same side, so you're not a Red or a Quinn, you're part of Dallas rugby, and then we select. But we're getting out of that, but there's from the generation right before ours, the Reds and the Quins weren't very collaborative, right? But if you like now that's done, right? It's we all agree that the only time we really want the other one to fail is when we're playing each other twice a year. Yeah. Maybe three times a year if we both make the playoffs. But other than that, we want success for those other clubs. I think that there's more honor and integrity. You're not trying to actively poach players. I'll tell people publicly, I want the Reds need the Quins to be successful, and the Quins need the Reds to be successful, because otherwise you just rest on your laurels, right? And then another region, look what happened to Houston. Houston can't maintain a D1 club because there's not that collective drive to achieve that. I don't think nobody can figure out why Houston can't they should have 2 or 3 D1 clubs.
No doubt.
I can't figure it out. So
the Woodlands used to be very competitive.
Yeah, and Hark used to be pretty competitive, and then West Houston tried to emerge as the D1 thing. But yeah, I think it's interesting, but I think we need to apply the same mentality we do to business to rugby. Don't try to force the MLR into our world. You have to, improvise, adapt, and overcome it, and realize it's emerging and evolving. And we, as amateurs, resist the MLR at our own peril, I think. Right? They're here to stay. They're here to be. We need to figure out how we fit in that. I'd love to see like a baseball model, personally, where we're treated like D1's like AAA and D2's AA, and D3 is single A, and then you go up to the big club. I'd love to see that. I think that'd be good for the sport as a whole. Whether that happens or not, who knows?
Well, if you look at the game in the States as a business, then that means we need money to compete. So to pull that money in, you've got to have a magnet. And if the MLR teams are that magnet, we're bringing in some overseas talent to spruce up the skill level in the games, get more people through the doors, raise more money. All that money is going to filter. It's going to water all the grass, and
right.
all the grass is going to get greener. Do you fear this influx of overseas talent watering down and preventing the ability for homegrown talent to develop on these teams, or do you look at it as a good thing because it's going to up the skill level and the overall draw of these MLR matches?
It's interesting. I think there are multiple layers to that question, right? Do I think big overseas rugby names put seats in stands? Probably not as much as, because everybody's trying to replicate the MLS David Beckham deal, right? They're like, if we bring David Beckham over here, everybody's going to go to soccer games. Well, everybody knows who David Beckham is. Nobody knows who
Maya Nanu is.
Yeah, or you could have
Chris Robshaw.
Yeah, you could have some of these stars in the MLR, and we do. We have some big names. Former All Blacks captain playing in San Diego. That doesn't mean anything to anybody outside the rugby circle. And let's be honest, the rugby guys are going to go anyway. Right. No rugby guy is going to be like, I'm either going to make the decision to go to the local MLR match because a probably over the hill huge name is there. I don't see that as a ticket draw. I do see that as a tool, because here's somebody who's been there, right? Now, he can mentor these players on how to be a professional. He can mentor the organization on what he's seen work, because a lot of these international clubs, they don't have millions of dollars either. They're scraping by. I remember Murray Mexted once told me that flankers and coaches are New Zealand's biggest export. So it's like, we can't compete with the yen or the euro, so we just keep producing more of them, right? And I think that was a really, really insightful thing to hear that from the top of Mount Olympus.
No doubt.
We can't compete with these teams that we put 100 points on, which is amazing. So I don't think that's going to help seats, but I think it helps infrastructure. As far as bringing over overseas talent being a hindrance to developing domestic talent, I don't think so necessarily. I'm more of the mindset that if you water down the talent pool to make a homegrown guy be able to play, you're not playing at the highest level.
Right.
You got to get these guys to that level rather than bring your level down. That's my opinion. Now, it can't just be an arms race, so I think the salary caps are a good thing. I think the foreigner cap in the short run is probably a good thing, because it can't be one of these like Yankees versus everybody else things, because then these smaller market teams will just cease to exist.
So you think running the MLR more like the English Premier League runs itself than like the French Top 14 does is probably going to help the MLR sustain itself long term?
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the way the Top 14 runs because I think that international representative rugby should always be the pinnacle. And if your club contract supersedes your domestic availability for your national team, I think there's something fundamentally wrong with the sport, right? Because if, and it's because we allow that, right? But I know that there are guys that are not, where their club could make them not available for international matches to represent their country, and I think that that's a problem. I think it needs to be a top-down model, right? I think the national team needs to have more player availability demands than MLR, and MLR has to have more control of players than D1, than D2, D3, D4, et cetera. I think once you start making it a financial thing exclusively, you kind of lose a little bit of the spirit, right? I mean, these guys that played for the All Blacks, they don't make any money doing it.
No, I mean, rugby, it's surprising to a lot of people when you tell them that it only became professional in 1995. And when you really think about that, that says a lot. I mean,
and the first €1 million contract was Dan Carter, and that was recent.
It was.
Like when you talk about like we live in the States where you see like baseball, basketball, and I won't say football, I'll say quarterback contracts that are just insane. And in Europe, you see these like soccer and Formula One contracts and cycling contracts that are just ridiculous. And then in rugby, Dan Carter got the first €1 million deal, but that was not that long ago from a relative perspective. I mean, you're not going to get rich playing this game right now.
No. No, you're not. There's money in Japan and there's money in France for sure. But some of those French teams are running at a deficit. The English teams, when they shut everything down because of COVID, we're talking about when they came back with no fans, that they were burning through cash, and they were running out. And I think that's still a big concern.
Well, they just shut down the Heineken Cup last week.
Yes,
right?
And that was because the French said they were scared of COVID. But
you can't think there weren't some financial considerations in that. I mean,
I would assume that played a bigger role.
Yeah,
yes.
And frankly, do we really have a problem with that if you're sacrificing short-term access for long-term viability? I mean, you got to make those calls sometimes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely think it would suck if you were in the prime of your career and stuff was getting shut down. But this has been a very odd occurrence for the last almost calendar year here in about a month. So, is there hope that the U.S. is going to compete sometime in in our lifetime? Are we going to be able to see a World Cup final?
A final's a big task, right? That's a big call, but can we be competitive consistently? I think our sevens team has proven we can be.
They really have.
Our women's team in sevens and 15 has proven.
Why have the sevens been so? Why has their rise been so precipitous, and 15s has really fledgled and muddied in mediocrity for so long?
I think direction, pathway, and consistency. Right. So most of the sevens players are on full-time sevens contracts. They are living, training, and hanging out at the OTC in San Diego. And I think that goes to your earlier example. Like professionalism helps, right? We have some really, really, really talented world-class players. I mean, Perry Baker's been named player of the world, 2-3 times?
Yeah.
I mean, he's phenomenal, right? And we've got a lot of guys. We have one of the best coaching staffs in the world, and not just Mike Friday, but Brownie is incredible. Like I still teach passing the same way that Brownie taught me how to teach passing. I mean, these guys just know how to teach, and I think part of it is creating a direction, right? We know this in business too. Like, if you're directionless and you don't know what your end goal is, you can't create a pathway to get there. And I think we're just so fragmented, right? We talk like we're a 15s country, but we don't act like one.
Right.
We outsource our player development to other countries and don't give them resources to work together. I mean, I think the U.S. right now acts more like a barbarians tour, right? Like, you get a bunch of guys, you get the best players available, willing to go on tour, and you get them to go together and say, all right, throw all your skills together and see what happens. It's kind of what we're doing. And inversely, Japan is assembling these guys for almost half a year before the World Cup.
Yeah.
New Zealand is putting provisions in that says, like, you got to play domestically to wear this jersey. Australia only recently changed their domestic availability rules as well. England for years has been really good at building up to World Cups, right? They know how to peak at the right time. So all these teams have these long-term development strategies and pathways. We don't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, we're bankrupt.
Yeah.
So I think we can get there. I think, everybody says the U.S. is a sleeping giant. For decades, they said if we ever learn how to play rugby here, we'll be unstoppable. I think it's a little more complex than that. But if we can't even get our local competition to play together, if we can't even get a city on the same page, like look at Dallas, right? And these silos from youth to collegiate to club to professional, where they're so siloed and they're not really working. They're not really collaborating. Sometimes they're at odds with one another. I mean, I was on a message board the other day talking about my view of sort of priorities for clubs. And I had some youth coach calling me an idiot because that person was looking at it strictly through youth lenses. And I'm like, look, we have different priorities, and I'm trying to look at this on a more global scale. And you're just saying, like, well, this doesn't apply to my 10-year-old kid, thus it's stupid. That's the nature of rugby in the United States.
Yeah.
So we have to fix that culture first.
It's very fractured. With all your interests, everything that you that takes up your time, how do you maintain balance in your life?
You just sacrifice everything but those interests. No, I mean, look, I'm fortunate that I'm able to be involved in a lot of things because I don't have some of the commitments that a lot of other people do that take a lot of time. I'm single and I don't have kids, so it allows me to kind of give back in a more macro space rather than a micro household space. So that's.
Sure, that makes sense. What drives you? What gets you out of bed every day? I mean, you seem like a very driven, ambitious person. Where's that come from?
I want to see what I'm capable of, and I want to see not just what I'm capable of, but what I'm able to give back. And I want to. I really, the thing that really gets me, the thing I get most excited about is creating or achieving something that has never been created or achieved. And that's really the thing that drives me. I get excited with sort of just climbing the mountain, right? And that process and that grind and then having that reward. And I realized recently, so I used to set a goal every couple of years to do something difficult, something exceptional outside of work, like a personal achievement. So, to that end, I taught myself how to hang glide so I could fly off the same dunes that the Wright brothers flew off of. I've gone scuba diving in some pretty interesting places, and I've done things like that. And I realized that was missing, and it was that reminder of what you're really capable of. So I just set a 5-year goal now to sail across the ocean. So I started that process to train myself, and I don't really have a background in sailing. My dad did. It was one of his dreams. So
wow.
I'm like, maybe I'll see if I can do that. And these kind of constantly pushing yourself to do something you haven't done yet. And again, it's we talked about earlier. So you never get complacent, because it doesn't matter how old you are. There's always something out there you can still do.
Yeah.
How often do we hear these stories of like, the 75-year-old person that gets a college degree, and we're like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome because it's unique.
Absolutely.
But there's always something unique available to everybody.
For sure.
Just a matter of what that is.
And it's a matter of mindset, right? I mean, if you are comfortable being comfortable, and a lot of people are, then your life just kind of passes you by. What is it about what is it about your mindset that you curate in yourself, where you're like, I'm up against some adversity, or like you said, there are things in business which, if you make the wrong decision, could be catastrophic. You said, I think, a couple times a day sometimes. I have the same thing. How do you foster that mindset in yourself to forge it so that it can withstand anything?
I think it's developed over time, right? I think that I would struggle to deal with the scale and scope of some of the challenges I deal with on a very regular basis today. 10 years ago, I would have really struggled with it. So I think it's like anything else. It's a process. You learn, you study, but now I can make these decisions, really big decisions, relatively quickly because I've had to. And I think part of that drive to see what you're really capable of, and realizing that ceiling's a lot higher than what people think it is. And I think a lot of people set their own ceilings, and a lot of people think like, I'm capable of like this, not realizing that it's like, that's a lot higher. Like, and you're not capable of what you realize, unless you're willing to fail trying, and then do it again, and then fail again, and do it again, and check your ego at the door, And I think it's really not that hard. You just have to want, and know that want equals work.
Sure. Condition yourself to it. What are you afraid of?
Failure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like not just falling on my face and having to get back up, but maybe failing to achieve your potential.
Yeah, like I
because you're not afraid of failure itself, because you strike out there and do things that you want to sail across the ocean. I mean,
yeah, but what I think
I don't think I know anybody who has ever said that to me. So that's awesome.
Well,
that's very.
You live in Dallas.
That's very it is. Well, I grew up in Seattle, so no, yeah, no, that's awesome.
Yeah, but you're like Bering Strait. I'm doing like Caribbean.
Yeah.
No, I think when I say failure, I mean like the whole false prophet syndrome, right? So being more the fear of being a fraud, or the fear of not of the culmination of all these experiences resulting in something meaningless. I think that's the fear, is not having lived a life that means anything, like not having a legacy that's valid, right? And I think it's not because my name needs to be remembered. It's because I think that I want to achieve. I want to leave this place having done something that matters. And I think that the risk of the fear of not having done that is probably what drives me.
Yeah. What would you tell a 20-year-old version of yourself, knowing what you know now?
Be less arrogant. You don't know what you don't know, and embrace the process.
So maybe be confident, but not arrogant and thinking that you know everything.
Right.
What do you want to be said about you when you're gone? What do you want on your headstone? That you've done something truly remarkable?
I gave more than I took.
Yeah, so this servant leader thing is very important to you. Where does that come from?
I don't know. I don't know where it comes. I think it's
religious. Are you?
No, I was raised pretty religious. I was involved in the church, and I wouldn't consider myself particularly religious now. I I actually tell people that you should be a good person for the sake of being a good person. If we're to be judged after this life, I feel that it would be for how we lived our lives rather than, making a claim, if you will. It's a pretty controversial way to look at it, but I think we should just be decent for the sake of being decent. I believe it kind of in a greater good approach. I think if everybody has the mindset, it's the prisoner's dilemma, right? If everybody's working for everybody else, we're all going to be better off.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a much more pleasant and rewarding life, not to just be a miserable cuss trying to take advantage of people all day long.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's easier to go to bed at night.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So if people who watch this podcast want to get their hands on some Pickle Juice Sport, where can they get it from? You said 10,000 locations, so anywhere from Academy to...
Yeah, to your local grocery store, to Walmart, picklepower.com, Amazon. We have a really strict rule at the office that says don't make it hard for the customer to give you their money. So,
yeah, absolutely.
So if your local running and bike shop, if they don't have it, call us and we'll get it there.
That's what I'm talking about. And if USA Rugby wants to actually reach out to you directly, how can they hit you on email?
They definitely have our number, but it's info@picklepower.com, or just go to picklepower.com, hit the contact sheet. And that goes for really anybody who's got an event, a team. We partner with a ton of ultra running events, nonprofit charity cycling events.
Helping with fundraising and things like that too, right?
Yeah. And we like being mentors to events, sharing best practices, some things we've learned, giving product, showing them the logistics of stuff. We're all about it. If it's a cool story, we'll throw our PR team on them and see if we can get them some press. Like we really believe in partnering with the community and trying to give back to the people that let us, enjoy the things that we've enjoyed. I mean, without customers, we're nothing.
That's awesome, man. Hey, I appreciate your time.
Yeah,
Thanks
man.
for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
It was awesome. Appreciate
it.
No
doubt. Well, that was a good one. I hope you enjoyed it. High energy as always. Philip's an awesome personality. He's got an awesome viewpoint on life, and it was great to talk entrepreneurship, adversity, mindset, and, of course, rugby. Hope you enjoyed the show. I'd love to know what you think about the podcast that we put out. I know I enjoy recording them. I'd love to know what you think about them. Drop a comment below. You can always hit me with hate or fan mail on Instagram as well, at Jess from the Northwest, or you can email me if you'd like to work together live at autographconstruction.com. We'll see y'all next time.